A massive thank you to my patrons who support me through Patreon and who have brought this episode of Shadowversity to you. If you would like to support Shadowversity and help me make these videos to the best level that I can, even a $1 donation per video is a tremendous help. There is a link to my Patreon page in the description below, and thank you for watching. Some people say that you cannot draw a sword from a sheath on your back. Well, I beg to differ. And putting it back? That easy! Yeah!
Shadowversity.
Greetings, I'm Shad, and as you've probably guessed, I'll be exploring the classic trope of wearing a sword on your back. And I'll be exploring the plausibility of it, can you actually do it effectively, and also why you would want to. Now, many people in this sword community here on YouTube have explored this thing, wearing a sword on your back. Is it plausible? Is it effective? Is it even possible? And stuff like that. And the larger consensus tends to say that no, it was never done historically. Why would you want to? And these are all the problems with it. But ever since I did a video exploring the plausibility of wearing an axe on your back, which was like a year ago, the same way Kratos does in God of War, I actually said in that video that, you know, I think there's some things about wearing a sword on your back that actually might make it a bit more logical. So I've been wanting to do this video for a good while, and I'm perfectly aware that a good friend to this channel, Scarlegrim, has actually made a video looking at this same subject, and what I found really interesting, that a lot of his thoughts married my own, that when you actually look at this from a fair kind of perspective, it isn't nearly as implausible as many people have supposed. And in actual fact, Metatron, our good friend at Metatron as well, has shown ways in which you can draw a sword from your back as well. So there are ways to do this. I really suggest you go watch these videos because I might reference a couple of things from here and there, but in this video I'm going to be adding a lot more to the discussion, because whenever I've looked at this, you know, carrying a sword on your back and how implausible it is, most people who say that this is impossible is doing it with a regular sheath. But I've always thought in my mind, well, I mean, if you really wanted to do this, you could make an irregular sheath that's specifically made to enable pulling it out and putting it back while it's actually on your back. And that's exactly what I've done right here. I've made a custom sheath. It's rough around the edges, all right? So, you know, ignore the rough edges here, but made specifically to hang on your back and to draw. I'm going to show you exactly how it can be done, because my goodness, it's really easy. And the advantage about this is that you can pull the sword out and put it back with one hand. This is significant. Even putting a sword away, you generally need to at least hold the sheath, you know, so you can line up the tip and then slot it in. But with this one hand. Now, there are a few different designs that other people have proposed and even made themselves to make carrying a sword on your back more plausible. There is a half sheath, which is the same kind of one that Scarlegrim proposed in his video, and for myself, I'm not much of a fan of this design because I just feel that too much of the blade is exposed. These weapons are very sharp, and if someone accidentally brushes up against the blade, they could actually cut themselves inadvertently. There's a really interesting design for a back scabbard in the video game Shadow of Mordor, and I really like that the game developers actually thought about this problem and tried to address it. The middle part of the top 2/3 of the scabbard is actually exposed, and because of the sword's profile, when you pull it out a little bit, the rest of the sword will actually fit through that opening and you can draw it from your back. I even considered making this design, but as I studied it further and tried to assess the practicality of it, though I feel you'd be able to draw the sword quite effectively with this design and the edges are covered and protected, putting the sword away would be extremely difficult and fiddly, and this is also another problem I see with the half kind of sheaths or scabbards that other people have made. Instead, I thought of a different design that you see me using in this video, and I'll explain the functionality and mechanics of this scabbard a little bit later in the video. So the backdrawing methods that Scarlegrim and the Metatron show in their videos are perfectly valid. I think they're very interesting, but the flaw with them is that they're either not full long swords, like what we see here, and they're not full sheaths, because a sheath, or a scabbard, this is technically a scabbard because it's made out of wood, are meant to protect the blade. Now, as to waterproofing, to an extent, unless a sword has an actual rain guard that covers the top, water still can seep down as well. And the scabbard on my back is not 100% waterproof, because if you'll see by the design, there is an opening on one side. So even though this isn't fully waterproof, you could wear a cloak over top, which covers it completely, because in reality, even if you were to have a regular sheath, you would still want to avoid it getting caught in the rain anyway.
Because you need to remember that the sheath or scabbard is not necessarily there to just protect the blade from water. You can protect the blade perfectly well by keeping it properly oiled. One of the primary reasons the sheath is there is to protect you from the blade when you're not using it. It's a very sharp implement, and you don't want to cut yourself inadvertently when handling, moving it around, or when you're wearing it. And as I mentioned before, that's why I don't like any types of sheaths or scabbards that leave parts of the blade exposed. Now, in regards to the scabbard actually filling up with water if you really get caught in the rain, well, it's easy enough just to drill a small hole at the very bottom to let the water drain out. And because this sheath has an internal lining, you could soak that lining in oil, which will oil the blade every time it's put in and drawn out, and offer some very good protection against moisture and rain.
So, how does this scabbard work? Well, I'll draw it in slow motion so you can see from behind. So, you see me grab, I pull, and there we go. See that side opening there? The scabbard actually has an opening on one side, but that's not all. You'll see that it's a bit unbalanced, okay? There's a flatter, wider portion right here. That is actually to help me put it away. So I put the sword there, and then I try and guide it into that opening. And once it's there, I just push it down, and it's in. I've even lined the inside of this scabbard with wool to help cushion it and hold it in, so this isn't going out. I can swing around and it's not going anywhere. I can test it more fully, but even if I swing this way, all right, to try and get the sword to fall out on the open side, it's not, because if I move closer to the camera, do you see the top of the sword? I've actually made provision in the scabbard for the point that sits in the middle of the crossguard to lock it in even better. And a lot of historical swords actually had a type of point coming down on the crossguard. And my goodness, just look how easy this is, guys. This is really, really cool. Now, sometimes it is a bit difficult to get the sword back in, and you need to fiddle around, but other times it's really, really easy. And the thing that makes a difference is practice. As soon as you get the memory of where it's going in, because I tell you what, it wasn't this easy to get the sword in the scabbard when I first started trying this. There was a bit of fiddling around, but after a couple of attempts, it gets easier and easier. But that's not to say there aren't the odd times out where I miss, like so. And so if that ever happens, it's an easy matter to fix the thing just by guiding it in and putting it back. But as you have seen me do multiple times, it's actually very easy to put it back one-handed without needing to guide or anything like that. Using your other hand is just a backup if you miss the mark and it gets a bit fiddly. So this scabbard design works, and it works really well. And if you're wondering how I made it, well, I've actually recorded the whole process. There's an entire build video on how to make a back drawing scabbard that I have posted on this channel just before posting this video. So do go check it out, and then you'll be able to make your own. Very easy to do. All you need is plywood, a jigsaw, and some glue, really, and you're good to go. And because this is so cool, let's just do it a couple more times so we can appreciate it. Look at that. And then we just want to put it back in. And if we miss the mark, we can just help guide it in like so. But still, this is very, very cool. And you can kind of feel when you don't get it in that first time. So if I'm determined to get it one-handed, there we go. So with the right purposefully built scabbard, you absolutely can draw a sword from your back and sheath it just as easily. Is there historical precedent for this, and would you actually want to do it in real life? This is another reason why I find Scarlegrim's video really instructive on the topic, because he actually shows a historical reference that I wasn't even aware of where the kilts actually might have done this in some circumstances. Not all of them, but some of them. And there are other certain historical precedents in which we can look at where carrying a sword on your back was done as well. There are some references of Scottish Highlanders carrying their larger claymores on their back, and there are also some depictions in Asian artwork, specifically Japanese artwork, of swords being carried on your back as well. Now, of course, for the most part, easily the larger majority, swords were hung on the side instead of on your back throughout history. There are just some examples, some exceptions to the rule where swords may have actually been carried on the back. And as I've proven here as well, it can be done very effectively, very easily, and can be drawn and do whatever. Yet what are those circumstances in which you might want to have a sword on your back as opposed to on your side? Well, some interesting things that might cause this. And one of the biggest differences is what you're actually doing at the time. If you need to go about just doing casual everyday things, a sword carried on your side is easily the most efficient thing. You don't need to make a custom build scabbard and everything like that. That's going to happen. Yet we don't often see swords in those circumstances depicted in, say, movies and pop culture. In actual fact, in movies and pop culture, there's a completely new, non-historical, mostly non-historical realm in which swords are carried and used, and that is the classic adventuring from fantasy. Now, if you're doing adventuring, you're traveling a lot, you're traveling through difficult environments and stuff, and as soon as you need to do some difficult things, having a sword securely on your back, and my goodness guys, this is really secure. Like, I can swing this around and it's not going anywhere, okay? And so having this on your back will be really useful for a couple of things. For instance,
running. Have you ever sprinted with a sword hanging on your side? That thing swings around heaps, but because this scabbard is so securely fixed to my back, it is so much better to run with this thing. But that's not all.
what if you need to crawl and not make a lot of noise? As soon as you get low enough and you have a sword hanging on your side, the scabbard's going to be scraping along the ground, okay? And so if you want it secured and in place, having it on your back would be preferable. And then you could just crawl wherever you need to go. And look, the sword isn't coming out. And so I'm all good to go. The other situation in which having a sword on your back is preferable is, say, you need to climb. Again, using hands and feet, and the sword might swing and clatter. But there's an even greater situation in which you really would want your sword on your back than on your side. And that's if you need to wade through somewhat deep waters. If it even comes up to your hip or something like that, having it on your back keeps the sword out of the water. You can even bend over to make sure the tip doesn't get in and cross fine. And if you're doing this a lot, say if you're fighting in marshland, and historically the Irish actually had to fight a decent amount in marshland, so much so that they didn't even wear shoes. So that, again, is a situation where having a sword on your back more preferable. The other situation is, what if you actually didn't have enough room on your belt, that you hung a whole heap of other useful things like pouches? Now, as an adventurer, they have pouches galore because they have so many useful adventuring things and stuff like that. And what if you actually wanted to hang more pouches in the section where you would hang your sword? Now, this one is a little anecdotal because honestly, I think you could probably get away with it. Maybe have the sword hang underneath it or coming through in between the pouches and stuff like that. But still, if you just didn't want to have to deal with the hassle, all the pouches around your belt and sword on your back, problem solved. And then by having a sword on your back, you have this belt baldric where you can hang more pouches. Again, that reason is a little bit air because you can just wear a baldric without a sword and still get the advantages, but still, more reasons. Well, the sword is a lot more difficult to be stolen or grabbed out of the scabbard than whether it's at your hip. If someone is walking around, their hands are already very close to where your sword would be if it's hanging on your side, and they can just grab, pull it out. But with on the back, well, it's a bit different. And because there's a trick, they might not know the trick on how to actually get it out, because you need to pull it up and then go on the side to get it out. And so if you pull it forward or any other way, it's not going to come out. So it's not impossible for a thief to grab the sword while it's on your back, but it's just one of those times in which it's more difficult, so you might want to have it on your back because of that reason. Another interesting reason is comfort. In all honesty, guys, having this hung on over my shoulder is a lot more comfortable than having it hung on your side. A sword does have a certain amount of weight to it, okay? And just having it hung on the side of the belt, it can really pull down sometimes. And if it's not secured properly, there are more secure ways. It can flip around, especially long swords, because long swords need to be hung on the side, so the back end will usually hit things. Now, it's not to say that this isn't awkward. I just think it's less awkward than having it on your side, because this can knock things as you're walking through, but you just kind of have to angle it up and walk your way through, make sure you don't hit anything. But this is a much easier method of carry. If I'm carrying a weapon for a very long period of time, of course you can wear swords on your side for a very long period of time. I'm not saying you can't, it's just that this is more comfortable, in all honesty. Over the shoulder is more comfortable than on your side, especially this way, and it's very secure. You know, another thing that I really should acknowledge about carrying a sword on your back is how awesome it looks. It just makes you look boss. I mean, it just looks cool. And then if you can make it work, even cooler, right? So cool. And then just let it slide in. So easy, so good. So that is a big bonus in which you might want to carry it on your back. But what about other things like sitting? Well, if you need to sit on the ground, I actually feel on your back is a lot better. You just go down, sit, and yeah, it kind of hits there, but that's fine. But if a sword is hung on your side, you actually have to angle it down, maybe rest it on your legs or something like that, and there's far more sword knocking on the ground than if it's on your back. Yeah, grass on my bum, grass on my bum. That was pretty easy. Okay, what about sitting in a chair? I have a chair. So, sitting down on a chair. All right, so hard to lean back. Actually, no. If I... Oh, actually, this is pretty easy. Let's see what's happening behind here. That was actually far more comfortable than I was expecting. So if I just go back like that, I can lean back, not a problem. This is pretty easy. So it's not more awkward than if it was on my hip, because of course if a sword is on your hip, you just have to angle it up and then, you know, you sit and it's there, but there is a chance it could trip someone over or get her in the way that way. Having said all that, I think there's another situation in which having a sword on your back might not be too preferable, and it's if you needed to draw the sword while inside with people around you. So say you walk into an inn or tavern and you go into the entry room and say, no weapons allowed, take your weapons off here. Okay, no worries. And you draw your sword and you accidentally hit someone on the side. You see, if a sword is actually hanging from your side, you can draw it far more safely because you can see all the blade coming out and no one's getting hit. You're all good? Okay, there we go, take the sword. And especially putting it away, there's a bit of fiddling around. And so what if someone's standing behind you and you go to put it away, oh, sorry. You could be a bit more careful, am I hitting anyone? I hope not. Is anyone hit? Okay, good, we're all safe. And the sword is sheathed. Yet still, I was wary to pull this sword out when I was in my lounge room or hallway, just because close quarters, didn't want to hit anything, and because you actually have to go on the side a bit to pull it out. So yeah, if I was inside a lot, I'd probably want the sword hanging on my side there just to be safe. But if I was out in the world adventuring, well then having the sword on the back, there, actually I think would be more preferable than on your hip. So in adventuring, if an adventurer is going around with a properly made scabbard that's actually made for back drawing and stuff like that, all power to you. Go ahead. I think it's perfectly reasonable to have a sword on your back. If it's in a historical setting, like if they're doing a movie based on a historical period, you're probably safer to do it on your hip, okay, in all honesty. So I'm not criticizing those people who criticize historical movies that depict people carrying swords on their back, because unless there's an actual reason, yeah, go ahead. I mean, Lindsay Page, rip them apart, mate. Back scabbard! Especially if the scabbard isn't made right. Oh, I love this thing. It's so cool. And then we just put the sword there, line it up, and she's in. I love it.
You know, this could actually be a kind of cool setting element for a fantasy, a way in which people are able to identify adventurers if they wear their weapons on their back or not. Look, there be adventurers. But how do you know they're adventurers? They're wearing their weapons on their backs, son, with all the running, climbing, jumping and crawling they have to do. It's far more convenient.
So there we go, guys. We are making back scabbards great again. I hope you've enjoyed, and if you want to know how to make your own back drawing scabbard, please do go check out my other video. I hope to see you there, and until that time, farewell. And out like so. You got the sword there, and then we want to put it away, and you just line it in and in, like there. It's the next one.